That's the thing about green smoothies, man. I mean, there's nothing that you can drink or take into your body that immediately agrees with you in such a way where you're like, this is good for me. You know?
I love that.
Cool. Well, thanks for doing this, man.
I'm stoked to be here.
It's I've been following you for a long time, and we went back and forth for a while. It was a little bit of a long time coming, but we're here today, and I'm super stoked. You know, I started when you were over here the other week. I was trying to remember how you first came across my radar. It might have been through Bobby Bailey or something, like somebody reposting something that you had done, and I was like, oh, who's this guy? And it was in the latter stages of your bike journey, so I wasn't there. I was not an early adopter on the Jedediah story, but I remember.
So I just June 3rd, 2016. I just had a job interview at Sizerville State Park in Cameron County, Pennsylvania. Right now, I'm driving through the wonderful hamlet of Emporium. Probably one of the smallest county seats of all the counties in the state, except for maybe Sullivan County. It is truly in the middle of nowhere. Route 120. It's also spectacular, gorgeous, beautiful, and it's so close to like an area that's just so special. Like the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon area is not far from here, and this is really nice too. It looks like this position that I interviewed for, it seems to me like there probably aren't that many people interviewing. I don't know if it's 3 or 6, but they're gonna hire someone, and then they're gonna expect them to be there like right away. Not even time to look for a place to stay. The position pays a little less than I would ideally like to make, but I don't really have a choice at this point, and it's better than a lot of jobs that I might get if I just go and say work at REI or Target or take one of the minimum wage jobs. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I have some bills that need to be paid and some things in college loans and whatnot. So they're yeah, June 10th, June 11th, they think they're actually going to have decided and expect like someone to be there and starting. I am doing the Laurel Highlands Ultra this coming weekend, not this weekend, but the following weekend. Today is Friday, so exactly 8 days from now. I actually hope to go down there later today, and hopefully I'll have some video for you guys and start doing my mile for mile journal of the Laurel Highlands Trail, which I'd like to put up on YouTube, and hopefully it would be a helpful resource maybe for people that want to hike, camp, or do the ultra trail running event that takes place every year in the second Saturday in June. You know, and I'm in a situation right now, so my unemployment, I've been unemployed for about 6 months from the state of Pennsylvania here, and I'm, you know, in the system here, so it probably isn't a big thing to get me back to work, though I was with the DEP, this is the DCNR, but, you know, it's just, it's a sticky situation, so I don't know, it seems like they were trying to almost like unsell the job, which is kind of like, I kind of feel like that's the thing, maybe the test of fire to see if you really want the position. Like they were, you know, like the kind of, are you sure, and it's this and it's that, is there, you really blah blah blah. So I don't know. I think I responded well, but yeah, I mean, it's like I'll do what it takes, giving up my weekends for the rest of the season. You know, it is what it is. I don't have much of a choice at this point. The job in its essence is kind of a wonderful job, and I mean, it would be great if it was a stepping stone towards something even more wonderful, or if that, you know, led to a permanent position and I lived happily ever after in the wild outdoors and made enough to get by. That's okay too. I mean, just so long as I do get by. So only time will tell, but a little video clip in Emporium and some dialogue here.
Pages of how Paris looks at sunset or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, I don't want people to have to click a link and go to a blog. I want it to just be like, that's what's so interesting about Instagram, is you're checking it for so many reasons. Mm-hmm. Like just to see what your friends are doing, or...
Alright, so I gotta go back to Sizerville State Park. It's now 12:12 on June 3rd, 2016, because apparently I accidentally stole the clipboard. something. Either I dropped the people's business cards, or in this case, I accidentally took the clipboard because I'm so nervous in the interviews. But I have called the secretary lady there, so if I do get this position, and I kind of hope I do now, I'm like, please, like, if I do get it, like, I don't want to start before June 13th, which is Monday after the Laurel Highlands Ultra, so I don't know, it is what it is. God, let it be if it will be, but I don't know. So, heading back, I thought I'd do a little bit of video as I try to go back there, because it's really beautiful, and I thought I was videotaping it before.
That's cool. And then you keep going. And then people followed me for a year and a half, and I didn't know what was coming next, and neither did they. So it was just a very interesting experiment of like live blogging, something that changed my life, and like bringing people along with me and inviting their voice into the experience where they're writing to me, telling me their immediate response to things, which is really cool.
It was cool. I mean, a couple observations on that. I mean, the first thing is, yeah, when you read someone's blog, like, I think the common mistake, this happens with athletes too, when they do their race reports, it's so episodic, like, it's like, then this happened, then this happened,
Right.
then this happened, which can lose the reader. Like, it quickly, devolves into something quite boring. But you never did that. It wasn't like, oh, I went here and I went there. It was more like, here's 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs that captures the essence of what I'm feeling right now. It was more in a more kind of like your emotional state as to where you were, rather than geographically based.
Well, I have friends who are very good at journaling, and they have shelves of their life, but it is very episodic. It's, I went on this trip, I talked to this person, I met this person, I broke up with this person, and I've tried to do that because I actually have a terrible event memory, but I have an excellent idea memory. Like, if you tell me an idea that really rings true to me, I will remember it verbatim for the rest of my life, but I will forget who told me. Like, my brain latches onto things that I perceive to be true, but they don't accredit it to anyone, which is probably bad. But at the same time, it's just like my brain is so attracted to true ideas. And so that's the only thing I've ever been able to journal, is if I'm biking over a mountain or I'm experiencing the Amazon, it's the emotion and the idea that came from the experience that I leave with.
Well, that's the more important thing anyway, right? But I would think that in your case, given what you just said, that it might be more important for you to actually do like a timeline so that can jog the idea when you sit down to actually write the book.
That's why
you're not going to forget the idea, But when it really became kind of a pure Instagram kind of viral thing. I mean, like, how many people were following you when you began versus when it.
So I worked at a charity called Invisible Children for 5 years, and from that I had gathered, because I spoke at high schools and colleges a lot, and so I had probably 7,000, which is a lot.
Right.
But then over the course of the trip, it went up to 70,000.
Right.
And it wasn't like, I mean, it was people tagging their friends, being like, "Oh my gosh, you need to read this. Oh my gosh, we were just talking about this." Those kind of things. That's how I found it. Which is great, and which is why, like, I really treat my Instagram as a community of people that want to be there, and because they want to be there, I'll ask them questions, I'll engage, because if they're there and they're following along the journey, we have a lot in common. If they're interested in what I have to say, then I'm probably interested in what they have to say. So it's been a really positive. The internet can be a very complex place and very destructive, especially for if you want to be constructive and you want to put something positive into the world. There's such a fever for skepticism and for cutting things down and clipping wings, and I've found that Instagram is kind of immune to a lot of that.
Yeah, maybe not immune, but certainly on the positive end of that spectrum in a big way.
Yeah.
which is cool. So, well, let's take it back a little bit. The origin story. You grew up in Nashville, the product of two adventurers themselves, who you would later sort of unconsciously follow in the footsteps of. But what was it like? I mean, talk a little bit about who your parents are and kind of what they did.
Yeah, so my parents in the second half of the 70s walked across America for 5 years. My dad is named Peter Jenkins, and he started from upstate New York in Albany, and I think it was Albany, and walked for 2 years from Albany to New Orleans. And his plan was to do a big V, go from New York to New Orleans, then up to the West Coast. You can't cut straight across because the entire Southwest is an impenetrable desert by foot, so you have to veer up and cut over Oregon or Washington. And so that was his plan. And when he got to, so he walked from New York to Washington, D.C., where he went to the National Geographic headquarters, and he walked in there and said, "I'm walking across America, and I think you should give me a camera. I'll take pictures for you." And they were like, "No." And then as he was leaving, they ran out and said, "Never mind, yes, here's a camera."
Can you imagine that today, though?
Yeah, I know. Never.
You wouldn't get in the front door past the
never.
receptionist.
Yeah, and so I know it's amazing how many interesting stories start with unfounded confidence and bravado of someone just walking in somewhere and trying to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a theme to living dramatically.
The ignorance is empowering, right?
Mm-hmm.
They always say on the end of it, if I'd known, I would have never even attempted it. But when you're just sort of blindly propelling yourself forward, it seems that somehow, magically these things can fall into place.
Yeah, a huge ethos that I live by is cultivated naivete, where you hang on to it, because if you lose that, if you get a little too wise to the world, then you just stop yourself because you analyze the risks more readily. But if you just have a little bravado and a little naivete, you do a lot more, So anyway, my dad had a lot of that. And really the intention of walking across America, I think he was 21, and he had just graduated from college, liberal arts school, and it was during Vietnam, and he just had this kind of existential crisis where he hated his country. He thought it was a bunch of BS, and then he kind of had this moment where he was like, well, I'm from a liberal state. I went to a liberal school. I'm from bougie Greenwich, Connecticut. I don't really know the U.S. And what's interesting is my dad grew up in the only government housing project in Greenwich, Connecticut. There was one building where the poor kids lived, and my dad and his 6 siblings and his parents lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. And so he just grew up with this really weird juxtaposition.
Right, so he's around the horse farms and the white fences and the beautiful manicured green lawns, but that wasn't.
And his rich best friends would come for dinner at his house because their mansions were so, their parents hated each other and there was no life there, and they would come to my dad's poor little hovel, and they would just be laughing and screaming and fighting, and it was so full of life. That really affected my dad. So I think that kind of gave him a certain level of strength and personability. And so he set out to really see America for what it was, and the best way to do that was on foot. And so he went to Nat Geo.
People had done it. It wasn't like no one had ever done something like that before, right?
John Muir actually walked from Chicago to Florida, I think. But I don't know if anyone famously did it.
Or at least sort of documented it for a publication.
Right. There are many great journeys in history, but I don't know. I know what's interesting, I'm named after a fur trade trapper named Jedediah Smith, and he was, I think, the first man of European descent to walk across the West and get to the West Coast.
Right, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and in a little bit of a haphazard way, but in my mind when I hear that, I'm like, well, this is destiny. You know what I mean? I know that part of your story is that you had this sort of lack of awareness when you began your journey, that in any way you were following in your father's footsteps, but this is your namesake, and you are the genetic product of these parents who had done this, and here you are doing it again. It's of course this is what you were going to do, and yet at the time
I had no idea.
The idea of doing it, that did not enter your conscious mind.
Well, there's a thing, it's so funny, you see in movies and you hear, when you're a kid and you hear adults say things that you don't have experience of, but then they get lodged in your mind. And the example being, I know so many people as they enter into adulthood and as they enter into parenthood, they say, oh my God, I am my mother. Or, oh my God, I am exactly like my dad. I never thought I would be. they start doing things unconsciously and then they'll kind of see themselves objectively and be like, that's exactly what my dad would have done.
But there's a difference between how you react in a scenario or a little, mild tick or something like that, and like saying, I'm going to go, from Oregon to Patagonia, like my dad walks, it's like it's such a glaring.
Yeah, you're right. No, that is an extreme example. But the thing was, I swear to God, I thought that it was so original, the idea.
That's hilarious.
And my parents were actually really good about not allowing their walk across America to truly define their identity. Like, I grew up I knew my parents had written some famous books in the early 80s, were on the cover of National Geographic, but they didn't talk about that. And like my dad and my mom would tell crazy stories. My mom would be like, oh, we were walking across Colorado and these men were screaming they were going to rape me, and they kept following us in cars, so we had to hide in a coyote hole for a night. That was crazy. And then she'd like go back to stirring the mashed potatoes, and I'd be like, oh my God. But it was wild, but I didn't I don't know, there's just such a mental block with seeing your parents as humans when you're a kid. They're something else. They're like a force that like watches over you and keeps you from eating candy. And it just took me a long time to really realize how extraordinary what they had done was.
It was just, this is something it was always just, that's what they did. It was no big deal because you grew up with that.
But so then when I was in my late 20s, I was 27, and there's something about 27 where you start to suddenly see 30 coming, and I was like, wow, when people are in their 30s, they like get mortgages and settle down, and so, like I just had this like idea that time speeds up in your 30s, and all of a sudden you're 60, and then all of a sudden you're dead. And so I was like, okay, I promised myself when I turn 30, I'm going to quit my job and spend a year doing something. The truth was, I promised I'm going to quit my job and actually pursue becoming a writer, because I know that's a dream of mine, and I loved my job prior to working at the nonprofit Invisible Children. But I loved it so much that I knew I could blink and be there for 30 years and never have chased the thing that I had itching inside me to do. So I gave my 3-year notice at work, and then kind of set in motion this idea of, okay, I'm going to go on this journey. And then I had met a guy who had biked from New Jersey to Buenos Aires, and I was like, whoa, that is such a good idea. And then I immediately started telling people, guys, when I turn 30, I'm going to bicycle from the United States to Patagonia. And I knew that I was like fast-tongued and like I could get out of it if I wanted to, so I was very intentional about telling everyone that I was doing it so that the community would expect it of me, and it would kind of create a social pressure to do the thing.
That's a powerful thing, right? It takes it out of the idea of fantasy or pure ideation into reality with the social pressures and the construct that creates that actually can compel you forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of people